The private investigator report had just arrived, and I could feel the mounting frustration. This was the fourth investigation in as many years, each one seemingly more futile than the last. Jason Thomas, a private investigator with an impressive reputation, had been the latest to take on my case. I had resorted to using 4 different private investigator firms over the past 4 years, hoping that switching cities and times of the year would throw off my wife and her lover. However, this new investigator had promised to catch them in the Australian Capital Territory, ACT. I had just finished a call with Mr. Thomas, who informed me that his team had surveilled both. For a period of 7 days, my wife Molly and John Decker were monitored by Mr. Thomas's team. They were observed from their office for the first 4 days and then followed to Dallas, where they attended a work seminar for 3 days. As I listened to the details of the investigation, I experienced a surge of anger and betrayal towards my unfaithful spouse. Molly, my wife, served as the administrative assistant to John Decker, the CEO of a fully owned subsidiary of a major international company. Our private investigator, Mr. Thomas, had promised to send us a written report. However, based on the information he had already gathered, it seemed despite the fact that they were under constant surveillance for the 4 days preceding their trip to Dallas, Molly and John continued to adhere to their regular routine of having lunch together before returning to work on the second day. However, they deviated from this pattern by stopping at a local bar after work. Each of them consumed 2 drinks before parting ways and returning home to their spouses, who were waiting for them. We elected to conclude our surveillance, operating under the assumption that the spouses would be aware of their activities until the following morning. The subsequent 3 days passed without incident, as both Molly and John proceeded directly upon returning home from work, where their spouses were already waiting for them. The Dallas trip proved to be slightly more intriguing, though not significantly so. Each of the 3 days, they attended the work seminar during the day, as the sun set and the city lights came to life. They would have dinner together before heading out for a night of dancing. The energy of the music pulsed through their bodies as they twirled and swayed on the dance floor, lost in the moment after about an hour of dancing and drinks. They would then return to their separate hotel rooms, located 10 doors apart from each other. A surveillance camera positioned down the hallway revealed that they did not leave their rooms until the next morning. A subsequent investigation revealed that the subjects did not leave their rooms until the following morning. The only anomaly was their behavior on the dance floor, which was described by my agent as 2 people deeply in love, moving in perfect sync with each other. While there was no inappropriate touching, there was a level of, the proximity between them was unmistakable. He consistently maintained an arm around her waist as they proceeded back to their table, wholly absorbed in each other's company. The agent meticulously followed them to the airport, ensuring they boarded the plane and took off for their journey home. The sleek metallic the aircraft's body shone under the airport's bright lights as it proceeded down the runway. Despite 4 years of private investigator reports, no new information was found. It appeared as though their lives were a blank slate with nothing noteworthy to report. Molly and I have been married for 15 years. We are both 36 years old. We were high school sweethearts and continued our exclusive relationship through college before getting married soon after graduation. Molly has always had a certain charm. She is not conventionally beautiful, but she has a pixie-like cuteness that draws people in. At the age of 56, she displays a striking physique that commands attention. Her superior, John Decker, is a tall and handsome man who stands at 6 feet 1 inch and weighs 190 pounds, a similar height and weight to me. JN exudes an undeniable charisma that captures the attention of all those around him. Many women are drawn to him. I have observed Molly's apparent closeness with John Decker over the past few weeks. Initially, she vehemently denied any romantic involvement between them, asserting that he was merely a colleague and a good friend. In fact, she proposed that she would take a polygraph test at any time to prove her innocence. However, during our most recent discussion about this, she referred to John as a special friend, which seemed to imply a deeper connection. My suspicions were further confirmed when Molly and I went out for dinner and danced with John and his wife, Gail, throughout the evening. On the evening in question, I was struck by the frequency with which JN and Molly conversed and danced with each other, particularly in comparison to their interactions with their own spouses. Gail, too, appeared to be aware of the closeness between them, giving them a raised eyebrow whenever they returned to the dance floor. It was evident that their relationship extended beyond the boundaries of mere co-workers or friends. The presence of workers or friends prompted me to question the nature of their relationship. With Jay's recent promotion, my suspicions have intensified. My thoughts have been preoccupied with Molly and her proximity to JN. I experience a sense of envy each time she mentions his name. I have discussed with Molly the possibility of finding she has considered seeking employment elsewhere, one that would not place her in such close proximity to him. However, she has dismissed this idea as implausible and asserted her loyalty to me. Nevertheless, my suspicions persist. I have invested a significant amount of money in private investigators over the past 4 years, hoping to uncover any secrets or infidelity. However, they have not yielded any meaningful results. As I passed the kitchen table last night, I observed Molly in a more serious demeanor than usual. She requested a brief conversation, and when I sat down, she informed me that John and Gail had extended an invitation for us to their lake house for the weekend. She stated that they would need to consult with me before making any decisions. First, before confirming, while one part of me was excited at the prospect of escaping from our normal routine, another part of me could not help but consider that 5 days a week at work is insufficient and that now, in addition to work, would be spending weekends with him as well. I attempted to come up with a reason not to go, but ultimately gave in and reluctantly agreed, despite my initial reservations. Despite my initial displeasure, I attempted to maintain a cheerful demeanor and replied, "Okay." However, Molly was unaware of the myriad of doubts and apprehensions that were consuming my mind. The man who had become a constant source of obsession was about to become even more present in my life. As the sun began to set, Molly and I prepared to embark on our journey towards JN. As we approached Gail's lake house, I experienced a combination of excitement and apprehension about the upcoming weekend. Despite having a map to guide us, I secretly hoped that Molly had never been there before. I wanted to surprise her. After driving for approximately 50 miles, we finally caught sight of the sparkling blue lake in the distance. The tranquil scenery provided a welcome respite from the bustle of urban life as we drew nearer. I was overcome with a sense of eager anticipation. Despite the winding roads, we eventually located the house. As we approached the front porch, I observed 4 figures. Figures were awaiting our arrival. My heartbeat accelerated as I recognized JN, but the other 3 individuals were unfamiliar to me. The only person absent was Gail, John's wife, who I presumed was preparing for our arrival within the residence. The welcoming committee comprised a towering, muscular man who appeared capable of lifting a vehicle with a single hand, a middle-aged woman, and a younger, exceptionally attractive woman. An elderly woman who exuded warmth and kindness, and an incredibly beautiful young woman who seemed to radiate confidence. The latter's long red hair cascaded down her back in waves, while her figure was accentuated by a skimpy bikini, which constituted a striking contrast to the attire of the others, who were clad in shorts and t-shirts. After parking the vehicle, we proceeded towards the porch. Following the introductions, my thoughts inevitably turned to Gail's absence. She was not present, and no explanation was provided. It seemed peculiar that we had traveled specifically to visit JN and Gail, yet she was not there. A hint of disappointment emerged, but I swiftly dismissed it, focusing instead on the enjoyment of our host's company, including the curious absence of Gail. As soon as I laid eyes on Molly and John, my instincts began to. After years of speculation about their relationship, seeing them together in person was a profound experience. Gail's presence contributed to the atmosphere of tension, prompting me to consider what she might know and who this attractive young woman was with John. Molly seemed unperturbed by Gail's appearance, which only heightened my suspicions. We were escorted to our room, a cozy den in the rustic cabin. The interior was spacious and charming, with at least 5 bedrooms and an equal number of bathrooms. Larry, a tall man with kind eyes, offered me a beer upon our arrival. His eagerness for one. The nature of the conversation prompted me to consider whether he was concealing something. However, after a 10 to 15-minute conversation, a brief conversation in the kitchen indicated that I was ready to join the others in the great room. The scent of wood and fire filled the air as we all settled in for the evening. Upon entering the great room, Larry announced our return in a boisterous manner. However, what struck me as even more peculiar was the sight of Molly and JN standing in a secluded corner, awkwardly pulling away from each other as if caught in a forbidden embrace. Their faces were flushed, and their body language was tense. I was unsettled by everything I observed. Larry's peculiar conduct, Gail's absence, and the current intimate interaction between Molly and John, who was the striking young woman accompanying them, had prompted Larry's peculiar behavior. Additionally, Molly's apparent affection towards John was perplexing. I was unable to dispel my unease, so I motioned for Molly to follow me back into the kitchen. I required answers to these perplexing questions. It was evident that there was more to the situation than met the eye, and I was determined to uncover the truth. However, as we entered the kitchen, Molly broke away from me. She then turned to John, inquiring as to the availability of a private location for a discussion. The request seemed to be met with a certain degree of anticipation from those in the vicinity, yet my instincts remained on high alert. John then gestured towards a nearby room, prompting Molly and I to step inside and close the door behind us. The atmosphere within the room was palpably tense and oppressive. "Molly, what is occurring?" I inquired, attempting to contain my mounting unease. Her demeanor was characterized by a visible expression of fear and anxiety, as if she had been anticipating this conversation with trepidation. "Tom, I must admit that I have not been entirely forthcoming with you. Regarding this weekend, I request your indulgence to elucidate the circumstances without interruption. I shall respond to any queries you may have subsequently." She paused, taking a deep breath, before continuing. "Gail has chosen not to attend this weekend. Gail, John, and I have been convening over lunches and dinners to plan for this weekend. I will explain in greater detail why you were not invited to these meetings." The initiative primarily came from Gail, with input from John and me. She exhibited a slight tremor as she spoke. The acceptance of a promotion by John resulted in the abrupt relocation of the couple to England. The news was a considerable shock to Gail, who would be compelled to depart from her familiar surroundings in a mere 2 weeks. The appointment of a replacement, a woman from the Cleveland office, only served to exacerbate Gail's distress. Despite my initial disquiet, I was compelled to acknowledge 3 crucial aspects of the situation. I reassured them that our relationship had always remained purely professional. We had never crossed any lines or shared a bed together. However, as difficult as it was for me to admit, I also had to tell them that I was not only still in love with them but I had also developed feelings for John. I was unable to contain my emotions any longer. I leaped up from my seat and erupted in disbelief. I asked them how they could bring me to this man's house to reveal they were leaving me for the same person with whom they had developed feelings. In a voice laden with disdain, I proclaimed that I was through and stormed out. It then occurred to me that we no longer had a residence, it was now in England with the individual who had caused our separation. As I proceeded towards the exit, Molly's grasp on my arm tightened, and her frantic voice reverberated throughout the room. "Please, Tom. That is not at all what I said. Please sit down and let me finish," she implored. Her words were urgent and brimming with a desperation I had never before encountered. My heart began to race as I turned to face her. "I love you," she continued. Her voice trembled as she asserted, "I am not leaving you. Ever. You are my husband, and I will be with you until death do us part." As she spoke, I began to calm down, though my mind remained reeling from Molly's outburst. She took a deep breath before continuing, "Let me reiterate, everything is basically Gail's idea." I nodded, attempting to process her words. "Gail, who is Gail?" I inquired, my confusion growing as Molly went on. "To clarify the identities of the other individuals present, the affable gentleman you engage in conversation with in the kitchen is Larry. He is the head of security at our company and is solely present to ensure the satisfaction of all attendees." I could not resist interjecting with a joke to relieve the tension. "Therefore, he is here to ensure I adhere to the established norms." Molly did not respond but instead proceeded with the introductions of the other individuals in the room. "Jackie, the attractive young woman seated nearby, is also available to assist you if you so desire. She is a kind individual and also happens to be a high." I was astonished by this revelation and shot Molly a questioning look. She reassured me that it was merely a show and that I should not be concerned. Finally, Molly gestured towards the middle of the room. The elderly woman in the group introduced herself as Janet, Larry's wife and a skilled cook. I was taken aback by this unexpected revelation, which abruptly transformed my peaceful weekend away with my wife into a dramatic turn of events. As I surveyed the room, I sensed that these individuals, despite their seemingly ordinary demeanor, harbored a wealth of hidden secrets and intricate connections. I sensed that there was more to this weekend than met the eye, and I had a strong intuition that Molly was not as forthcoming as she appeared to be. She informed me of everything, and in that moment, I had a sudden realization. I saw through the hidden truth behind the charade. Molly and John had a plan. They knew that after this weekend, John would be out of her life forever. Therefore, they had arranged to finally be together as lovers during these few days. After that, John and his wife, Gail, would be leaving for England on Sunday. Throughout the weekend, I was forced to bear witness to my wife's infidelity. Despite this, we maintained a facade of normalcy and happiness, as if nothing untoward had occurred. Larry was brought in as a precautionary measure to ensure I did not resort to drastic actions such as killing John or drowning my unfaithful wife. Additionally, Jackie was present to offer me a semblance of companionship amidst this complex and convoluted scenario. Both Larry and Jackie were integral figures in this elaborate scheme, pursuing the same ultimate goal. Larry's objective was to guarantee that John and Molly would have their desired weekend of intimacy. Molly's tone was characterized by a blend of frustration and anger as she spoke. "I do not concur with this plan of action," she stated. Tom surveyed the lake house, his gaze seeking Gail. "Where is Gail? You claim this is her idea, yet where is she?" he inquired. Molly took a moment to collect herself before responding. She decided that for her emotional well-being, it was necessary to. Given that it would be optimal for her to be absent from the proceedings, John has entered into a post-nuptial agreement stipulating that, should he and I engage in any form of communication at any point in the future, he would be entitled to nothing in the event of a divorce. Gail will receive 100% of the assets. A prolonged silence ensued as Tom processed this information. "I have also signed a similar document for you, Molly. Both agreements commence upon John and Gail's departure for England, as John and I are employed by the same organization. They also stipulate that sexual intercourse is prohibited, or romantic contact between this Sunday evening and when they leave for England after this weekend. Tom, I will truly be all yours, and I swear to spend the rest of my life making up for the hurt I'm causing you now." Tom's eyes flickered with hurt and confusion as he asked why I am here when Gail isn't. Molly replied, "There is no way that you would agree to let me come to John's lake house without you, for the same reason you weren't invited to the planning lunch." She paused before adding, "You would." She had just rejected his proposal outright. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. What if she now rejected the entire idea and asked him to either join her for an immediate return home or stay with John and say goodbye to their marriage? Molly's expression turned pleading. "Tom, it's not like that. Please understand that although you are my lifelong soulmate, I need this weekend with John to work through things." She handed him a slip of paper with Gail's number on it. "Also, Gail is expecting a." Tom received a call from his wife. His heart felt heavy as he looked at her, knowing that their marriage was hanging by a thread. "Molly, I'm asking you one more time not to do this." Larry maintained a watchful presence throughout the remainder of the evening, maintaining a constant proximity between me and John. At that moment, I contemplated departing and initiating divorce proceedings. However, I was compelled to ascertain the underlying cause of Molly's abrupt behavior. I sought counsel from Jackie, disclosing that Molly's actions were enticing, yet I was not inclined to assist her in violating our marital vows. That responsibility rested solely with her. Additionally, I presented Jackie with the option of departing. Alternatively, I could remain and observe the ensuing tumult. The next occasion on which I encountered the adulterers was at dinner. It was evident that Janet had been directed as to her seating. John was positioned at the head of the table with Molly seated adjacent to him. Larry was seated between John and myself with Jackie next to me. Janet took a seat opposite her husband. When Larry was not otherwise engaged in serving us food, the tension at the table was palpable as we all attempted to navigate this peculiar dynamic. As I glanced over at my wife, Jackie, during dinner, I was unable to help but, however, it is notable that she was not wearing her wedding rings. The glint of sunlight off her bare fingers was a stark and unwelcome confirmation of my deepest fears. I sat in silence throughout the meal, unable to speak anything other than, "Not good," as I pointed to her ringless hand. She seemed to ignore my comments and simply continued eating, all while shooting sly looks at John. After dinner, Jackie changed into a stunning red bikini and headed for a swim in the pool. I watched her from my seat on the edge of the pool. Regretting my decision not to utilize her services to exacerbate matters further. JN and Molly appeared, accompanied by each other, both attired in swimsuits. Larry's attempts at initiating conversation with me only served to highlight the orchestration of this entire situation, which had reached a point of heightened surrealism. Marley approached and took a seat next to me. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I love you, Tom. It will all work out." I was rendered speechless. I had been informed that this woman was clearly insane. I stood up abruptly and walked away, ensuring that everyone could hear me say, "Go to hell." The remainder of the evening was spent avoiding everyone except for Larry, who consistently observed me from a distance. I found solace in his presence, as we had a robust friendship that could withstand any awkward situation. As the night progressed, I was unable to dispel the feeling of unease and decided to call. I contacted Gail for her perspective on the situation. She responded promptly, her voice conveying a sense of sadness. "Good evening, Tom. I know you must have seen my number on your call Idaho. How are things going with the situation? Are you still at the lake house?" Her response took me by surprise. "Tom, I'm sorry for causing this chaos. I never intended to hurt you or Molly." I interrupted her. "What made you think this was a good idea? This could have a detrimental impact on my marriage to Molly." Gail paused before articulating her rationale. "I concede that my initial inclination was to consider solely the implications for my own marriage with John, and I failed to contemplate the potential consequences for you and Molly. It is a commonly held belief that women are more forgiving of infidelity than men." My mind was in a state of turmoil as I attempted to comprehend her reasoning. However, I found myself questioning the rationale behind risking everything for an affair and the rationale behind offering them a weekend of sexual intimacy as if it were a transaction. Gail's voice softened as she continued, "JN has been suffering for years with Molly's refusal of sex. She consistently asserted that she would not engage in infidelity behind your back. However, I observed a growing connection between them with each passing day. I sought to prevent any potential contact between them in the future, as it could financially ruin both of them if it ever came to light. I was disheartened to realize the gravity of the situation. Gail had deliberately excluded me from the planning process because she was aware that. Upon entering the bedroom, I observed that the space previously occupied by Molly's belongings was now vacant. This served as a stark reminder of the deterioration in our relationship. The prospect of Molly and JN residing in their new bedroom only intensified my despondency. I found myself ruminating on the implausibility of Molly's belief that we could simply revert to our pre-weekend circumstances. It appeared that she was under the impression that our past could be easily overlooked. A year-long emotional affair with John, without any discernible consequences. Were they so entitled? So consumed by their own desires that they believed everyone would understand and accept their actions? At midnight, there was a soft knock on the door, and Jackie entered. She inquired as to my well-being and alluded to her availability. If needed, I thanked her for her offer but declined, feeling overwhelmed with she mentioned that her original room was also mine before she found an unassigned one. I was unable to sleep and ventured out to the pool area. I could hear the soothing sound of water from the hot tub and dragged a lounge chair closer to it as I settled in exhaustion. I drifted off into an uneasy sleep, and I was awoken by voices approaching the pool. My heart raced as I recognized the voices as belonging to Molly and John. They were unable to see me due to the short rock walls separating us, but I was only 10 feet away. Molly's voice was filled with excitement as she informed John of her anticipation for this moment and her love for him. Her words caused a sharp pain in my chest as she spoke about the limited time they had to make up for lost time. She suggested getting Molly gracefully rose from her seat and excused herself to the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I could feel a knot forming in my stomach, threatening to make me sick. The thought of my entire life falling apart because of this despicable man made me want to vomit as I watched Molly disappear into the kitchen. The kitchen was a particularly unpleasant place to be at the moment. I found myself despising Molly for the emptiness that now consumed me. Everything seemed dark and bleak, as though a void had opened up inside of me. When John emerged from his suit and joined Molly in the kitchen, I crept up behind him in a fit of rage. I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Hey, ___," as though that were his new nickname in my mind. John turned to face me just as I was about to deliver a particularly vicious kick to his groin. As I aimed a swift kick toward his groin, intending to inflict significant pain and render him incapable of engaging in sexual intercourse with my wife, my aim was slightly off. Instead of hitting him where it would really hurt, I caught him in the lower abdomen. The pain was sufficient to cause him to double over and fall backward into the pool. I knew Larry would be awake by now and on his way out to see what all the commotion was. However, I was not concerned about a physical confrontation with him. He might have some choice words for me, but he would not risk assault charges. Furthermore, the damage had already been done to his boss at that moment. One thing became very clear to me: Molly's loyalty lay with John. She came running to his aid, not even bothering to check on me. I could no longer bear it, and I began to weep. As tears streamed down my face, I retrieved my bag and proceeded to exit the residence. However, before leaving, I performed one final act. I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the kitchen counter for Molly to discover at a later time. I hoped that doing so would finally prompt her to comprehend the extent of the damage she had caused. The days that followed were a prolonged period of solitude and introspection. I spent my time in a recliner, my gaze fixed vacantly upon the television. The images that flashed across the screen held no allure for me. My mind was preoccupied with thoughts of my wife with that detestable man, John, who was intimately acquainted with the layout of our lake house. I could envision them in every room, embracing with triumphant grins, kissing passionately as they gazed out at the water, entwined in bed while he engaged in activities that should only be reserved for me. The betrayal was profound, and I found myself harboring resentment towards her. As the hours passed, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with the question of whether she would return home. I was tempted to believe that she would not, as I was uncertain of her whereabouts. However, on Sunday evening, I observed the arrival of a vehicle at our residence. It was John and Molly, who were engaged in conversation for an extended period. Finally, John emerged from the vehicle with the apparent intention of opening Molly's door for her. This grand gesture was clearly meant for my benefit, but his body betrayed him. He was stiff and in pain from the kick I had given him just 2 days prior. He had to cling to both fenders of the car just to make his way around to her door. Even then, it was clear that he was struggling as he helped Molly out of the car. It appeared that it was Molly who was assisting him, rather than the other way around. I experienced a modicum of satisfaction as I observed their awkward struggle. My parting remark at the lake house had visibly dampened their illicit love affair. The tension was palpable, thick in the air. John and Molly held on to each other. In contrast, their bodies were entwined in a manner suggestive of two lovers who were reluctant to separate, despite my presence. They had made this display of returning her to me after she had chosen to remain with him, despite the fact that she had the option of remaining with me at the lake house. As I observed them from the doorway, I felt my blood boil with rage, despite my awareness that they were clinging to each other without concern for the opinions of others. However, I had reached my limit. I reached my breaking point and stormed out of the house, intending to confront John. If he did not leave within 5 seconds, I was prepared to take further action. He limped back to his car and drove away. I walked back into the house, still seething with anger. I sat down in my recliner, but Molly did not even acknowledge the departure of John. She strolled in with a fake smile, as if she had just returned from an evening with friends. Her demeanor was both absurd and infuriating. Despite her attempts at affection, I ignored her and turned up the volume on the TV. However, she persisted in trying to kiss me until I finally pushed her away with a heavy heart and gritted teeth. I spoke the only words that needed to be said: "You will be staying in the guest bedroom from now on. Tomorrow, I will." I consulted with an attorney to initiate the legal proceedings for a separation. It is possible that at some point in the future, one of us may enter into a new relationship and request a divorce. However, for the time being, we can coexist in this household. I returned to watching television, but as Molly proceeded up the stairs, her anguished sobs betraying her distress, I experienced a pang of remorse and sadness. In the span of just a single weekend, she had lost both her romantic partner and her spouse.